Renowned art critic Morph shows his importance as he jumps the long queue for the Art Basel show. He makes his way into the exhibition floor where he comes across an android art piece called Hobo Man. After inspecting it, he has a pretentious conversation with the agent of the artist as he gives his hash opinion. Meanwhile, outside the exhibition, Josephine takes her daily Instapic with a large order of coffee in hand. She is interrupted by a call from her coworker named Coco, who alerts her that her boyfriend is having an affair with another woman. Back inside, Gretchen tries to soften Morph up to hear his opinion on a piece she wants to buy for the museum she works for. He hints that it could be a good buy when his attention is taken as Josephine walks past them. The art critic quickly rushes over and notices that she's upset and hands her a handkerchief to wipe away her tears as she vaguely explains the situation. She arrives at her desk where Bryson, the art installer, makes fun of her for being late with the coffee. He wanders off to alert their boss Rodora of Morph's presence at the exhibition. She quickly makes her way to him where they discuss an interactive art piece called The Sphere. He is more interested in the rumors that her agency might be losing their best artist Piers to her rival John, but she dodges the question before leaving. After the exhibition, the important people head over to the after party where Josephine sits there depressed while Morph tries to comfort her. Meanwhile, the two top dogs in the art curation scene are making their moves as Rodora is there to recruit an upcoming artist named Damrish, while John completes his poach of Piers. Josephine decides to ditch the party to attend a satellite show, and Morph tags along, after which they make their way to her place where the critic insults the show and reminisce about a moment they had between themselves in the past. The following morning, Rodora sends a voice message complaining about the lack of sales they made from the exhibition, with the Sphere being the only exception. In the interim, Morph is at his place looking at pictures of him and Josephine. All the while, she leaves her apartment and finds a walking stick at the entrance. She looks around and sees a human hand protruding from the top floor. Josephine makes her way up to find an old man collapsed on the floor. She alerts a fellow tenant to call the paramedics, while a cat meows from the room. Rodora comes into the office to find no one at the reception desk. As the phone rings, she asks Bryson who's supposed to be there. The snitch informs her it's supposed to be Josephine, and even adds more spice to his sabotage by stating that she's always late. The boss asks Coco to take her place at the desk, prompting her to answer the call. Bryson tries to make his impression on her by stating that he too is an artist, but she's really not that interested. Rodora has a catch-up with Morph about the new artists that she's signing, and he's impressed with the roster she's building. Soon after the call, Josephine comes late and apologizes to her boss. She tells about the sudden death at her apartment building, but Rodora has already taken Bryson's word and decides to demote her till she gets her act together. She explains that Installer holds a grudge against her because she turned him down when he tried to make a move on her. After work, she goes home to drink her bad luck away, but later makes her way down to collect her mail. She has small talk with a tenant who alerts her that the old man was an artist and left a note that all his work should be thrown away. She smells an opportunity, so she makes her way to the old man's room and begins to inspect the eerily captivating art, but gets startled when the cat pops out from a lampshade. The following day, Josephine meets up with Morph, who professes his love for her. She also returns the feelings, which kind of makes them a couple, but she is more interested in him having a look at the artwork. The critic is absolutely awe-inspired by the works. He alerts her that there will be a big market for it, which is music to her ears. She reveals herself to be the one who represents the artist. Later at the office, Coco is harshly scolded for allowing a hostile competitor into the workplace. Josephine remembers that she wanted a cat, so she gives her the old man's one. When she returns to her desk, she meets Bryson looking at the artwork, and he too is moved by it, but she sacks him away. Later that evening, Josephine looks through the artwork, which she has now moved to her room. She's interrupted by an unexpected knock on the door and nervously opens it to find Rodora standing there, who proceeds to let herself in. Bryson snitched again, so the boss has come to look at her little find. She identifies the artist as Vetril Dees from what is written on the painting. Josephine explains how she came to possess them. Her boss strong-arms her into partnering together because of a non-compete clause in her contract. They later get lawyers to help get her story straight, that she found them in a dumpster. They move some of the collection to the office, where Morph offers his services for exclusive rights to write a book on the artist and his works. He also takes some pieces for himself. Meanwhile, at the painting forensic lab, Gita calls Rodora to alert her of her disturbing findings. As she steps away, blood oozes from a part of the painting. Back at the office, Coco overhears a conversation of her boss with a PI about covering Vetril Dees' dark past. Morph also begins doing his research on the artist for the book, and finds out that he had a rough life because he was abused by his father as a child. He used his art to express these traumas. While he writes his books, Josephine interrupts to alert him that her ex-boyfriend is having an exhibition, so he should review Bomb.it for her. Rodora later holds an exhibition showcasing Deez's work, where some critics reveal to Morph that his review of the ex-boyfriend's exhibition crushed him. It caused him to crash his car while in a drunken state and is currently in a coma, which makes Morph feel guilty. Meanwhile, Josephine gets confused when Rodora spreads the narrative that the number of pieces produced by Deez was very limited. She explains that artificially increasing the value of the works through scarcity is a tactic of the trade. The boss has asked Bryson to take some of the artwork to a shortage facility in the mountains for a rainy day. He stops on the way and removes a few pieces for himself before continuing. While driving, he lights a cigarette to smoke while glancing at the art he just stole. When he looks away, the painting moves, triggering the supernatural activities. The ash from his cigarette ignites his shirt, causing him severe burns. He manages to extinguish the fire while driving, but gets spooked out when he sees an apparition of the artist in his mirror. This causes him to crash into an abandoned car garage. He extinguishes another fire that threatens to burn the expensive art. Bryson yells for help but gets no response, so he breaks into the building to soothe the burns on his skin. As he does so, the painting of monkeys hung on the wall come to life and drags him inside as he tries to fight back. The following day, Josephine and Rodora have tracked Bryson's van to the police impound yard. The officer explains events based on the evidence at the scene. According to their reports, he might have hit his head after the accident and wandered into the woods. There is also a homeless camp nearby, so anything of value in the car was probably cleared out by them. But Rodora tries to cover their tracks by reporting that nothing of value was in the car. Josephine berates her ex-boss for this blunder before speeding off. Rodora calls Bryson, thinking that he has run off with the paintings. Meanwhile, John pays Piers a visit for them to discuss his next project. He mistakes a pile of trash for artwork and starts to prize it till he's alerted that it's not art. Very awkward indeed. Later on, Morph alerts Josephine that while cataloging Deez's work for the book, he noticed that there are large gaps from periods of his work. She knows this could be caused by the missing painting, but says nothing. Back at John's office, Coco comes in for a job interview after being sacked for her earlier mistake. He notices that she worked for Rodora. Coco plays to that by giving him information about a scandalous file about Deez. This gets her the job. Elsewhere, Gretchen tries to get the museum to have an exhibition starring Deez, which they are very much interested in. Morph's research leads him to one of the few people that knew Deez. He finds out that a private investigator is also on the trail. That PI was hired by John, and he's found information on Deez that could expose his dark past and devalue his work. After their meeting, John prepares to close the office alone when the supernatural starts happening again, as he too owns one of Deez's painting. He gets hung by a sinister hand when he tries to change a malfunctioning light bulb over an art installation. The following day, Coco comes in with coffee, only to find her new boss's lifeless body hanging from the ceiling. Soon after his funeral is held, Morph, with his critical eye, bashes the color of his casket. Damrish sits next to Josephine, and she immediately starts flirting with him in front of her boyfriend, who doesn't notice. The art agent for Hoboman complains to the critic that his unfavorable review for artwork killed the sale. It is now gathering dust at storage facility. Later, Morph starts to see the paintings move while doing some adult exercise with Josephine, which spooks him out. They break into an argument when he tells her that he's seeing things, but after exchanging some words, they hug it out. Afterward, the critic makes his way to an eye doctor for an examination. To his surprise, his vision has rather made an improvement. He calls Gretchen after the appointment to criticize her for telling Josephine that he is still with his ex when that was not the case. As he starts shouting down the phone, Gretchen alerts him that she has a live visual on Josephine out on a date with Damrish. He cuts the call and makes his way to Gita's lab, where she informs him that Deez used his own blood to paint some of the reddish blacks and the shadows in all of his works. Meanwhile, at the art museum, it is revealed that Coco now works for Gretchen when she is dismissed after a long day of work. Gretchen stays back alone and decides to interact with the sphere by putting her arm in one of the holes. Her facial expression turns from delight to horror as she is unable to remove her hand. It is only released after her arm is ripped to shreds. She falls to the floor, bleeding out. The following morning, Josephine alerts Rodora of her death, but the Deez exhibition is doing fantastically well, so they don't know whether to jump for joy or cry. Their call is interrupted when Morph comes over. After also hearing the bad news, he walks in to see Damrish making breakfast, and just like that, Morph and Josephine's romance is dead. As he packs some of his belonging out, he sees Gretchen with her arm off on the side of a bus, but it changes to a normal hand shortly after. The critic continues to see and hear things. It gets so bad that he confronts Rhodora about it. He warns her that all the strange things happening is connected to the art. It must be imbued with some kind of dark spirit. He suggests that they do what the artist instructed and throw it all away, but the money is too much for her to do that. He promises to write an article about darkness of Deeze's work. The critic intends to box up the pieces he has. He posts the article and quickly calls Coco to hire her as a temporary assistant to help him archive and pack all the art. He then receives a call from Josephine, who scolds him for the article before going to a risky-looking bar with Damrish. While there, the artist reveals that he's gone back to his old agent. An annoyed Josephine leaves the bar, but her car is blocked, so she calls a tow company to move it. As she waits, an art museum suddenly pops up behind her, so she enters and calls Rhodora to inform her about Damrish's departure. While they discuss, the paint from the art behind her starts to flow towards her. Meanwhile, Morph goes to his art storage unit where he's confronted and killed by Hoboman. Rhodora also has a close encounter with death when one of her garden art pieces almost crushes her. While she was outside, Josephine gets attacked by the paint as it completely covers her while she screams. The following day, Coco makes it 3 for 3 as she finds Morph's dead body. Josephine's car rather gets towed. She can be seen in the graffiti in the wall with a facial expression of anguish. Rhodora seems to have survived as she receives a call informing of the famous critic's death. She has a moving company pack all the art in her house out. She sits in her backyard thinking she's made it alive, but suddenly, her tattoo of a buzzsaw on her neck starts to spin like a real one, also killing her. Coco has had enough of the deaths, so she decides to pack back to her hometown with the cat. She passes a homeless man who's ironically selling the missing pieces from Deeze's work to a couple for $5. That brings the movie to an end.